Anne and Lawrence, they were all four. They waved him goodbye at Belgium Airport in November 2018. Theo first landed in Melbourne, and after spending some time there, in Sydney and in Darwin, by the May of 2019, the adventurous and likeable young fella was ready and looking forward to returning home to Belgium. But before he would do so, he had one last place to see. A place that's fairly well known around the world, Byron Bay. Byron Bay sits south of the Gold Coast, and it's his family not hearing from him. They became worried. Now, not hearing from him for up to a week was not unusual for Theo. He was always on some sort of adventure, always up to something, and he was so far away. But he should have been back in Sydney by now, getting ready to come home to Belgium. So they were kind of expecting to start talking about that. That's when they realized something was probably quite wrong. It was also she was never heard from again after she left the apartment around midday. People began to notice she was missing when later on that same July day, a friend of her was paging her, because pagers were all the rage at the time, paging her to no response. This friend eventually went to Susan Walsh's apartment, knocked on her door. Susan Walsh's apartment was empty. It turned out that Christian, Susan's boyfriend, and her young son, they had just popped out at the time. And then when they got back, they were like, yeah, no, Susan never came home. She just went to make a call, and that was it. When the investigation began, police started with, as you can imagine, both Christian, Susan's boyfriend, and Mark, her estranged husband, but both were cleared relatively quickly of having anything to do with what happened to her. So had she gone to the payphone? Had she even made a call from that payphone? Thing was, when the police checked nearby payphones to see if that could give them a lead as to where she had gone, there was no record of any outgoing calls from any of the nearby payphones that morning. Either she never made it, or never intended to make a call and just wanted an excuse, yet she took no money or items with her. But interestingly, an employee at a pizza place which was directly across the road from Susan Walsh's apartment, he claimed he saw her go back in to the apartment that afternoon. So he says he's full sure he saw her go home after she made that call. Susan was working on a variety of stories, not only the vampire one, but other ones, and she was working on documentaries, writing books, so on and so forth. So she didn't have a phone. She kind of did everything a little bit old school. So she would have a calendar, writing in, meeting this person, interviewing this person, so on and so forth. But the calendar in her apartment was missing the entirety of July 1996, as if somebody had just... Police investigated Susan Walsh's disappearance for 6 weeks, ultimately coming up empty-handed. They had no idea of what had happened to Susan. Others do, though, and none of them good. Some tips came in that Susan was working as a sex worker and had been spotted in black limos. Every time somebody called out to her, though, she would speed away. Another sex worker said a woman who resembled Susan told her entire life story, things which were not publicly available. Some think she had been trafficked, maybe by the same Russian mob she wrote about. Had they killed her? Had she relapsed into the addiction that she once had? Allegedly, Susan had a stalker, someone who was out to get her. Not even as a result of her writing, it was an ex-lover. She had to file a restraining order and everything.
It's quite deeper. Probably a stalker right now. I do have a stalker.
As I said, Susan didn't have a home phone. She would have to use the payphone every day that was a block away. So, if somebody was out to get her, maybe wanted to do something, nab her, they could easily just wait there on the street, public property street, wait there all day till she eventually went to use that phone to make a call, which she always did. Was somebody waiting for her? Now, this ex was cleared by police, but if you were following her, you would probably find it pretty easy to know where she would be vulnerable every day. But again, with what she was investigating, there was no shortage of theories nor suspects. If the pizza employee was correct in what he saw, and he was telling the truth, that she did indeed re-enter her apartment, well then likely you're looking at Christian and you're looking at Mark, the two likely suspects. Something must have happened in her apartment building, but there was no signs of a disturbance, violent scene, nothing like that. But Mark always refused to let the police search his apartment. her estranged husband, who allegedly was not very happy with the work she was doing, like being a stripper and all that kind of thing. He was so unhappy that she was doing it, he murdered her. And it's unlikely she left of her own volition. She was in the middle of a master's program. She was working on documentaries, on books, on news articles. Sure, her young son, her 11-year-old son, she wouldn't have left him behind. Was it the Russians? Was it the vampires? Police looked into both of those and came up empty-handed. And there was no trace of this well-known journalist on the rise. She was sinking her teeth into some scary shit. Maybe Nosferatu sunk them right back at her. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you being here for this whole episode of that chapter. As you can see, it changed the background because I actually really love this background, but had to do some painting and fix some stuff. I hope the microphone sounds a little better. You know, I'm always trying to make my videos just that tiniest little bit better if I can, because I really love making them, and I hope you enjoy watching them. And your support, as always, has been incredible. If you're looking for some more of That Chapter, please check out the That Chapter Patreon. For $2 a month, you get early access to every single video, and there's a whole playlist of Patreon-only That Chapter videos. You can also check out the That Chapter podcast, which has a brand new episode out every single Monday morning, and it's all podcast-exclusive stories that we just tell there. Or you can check out the That Chapter merch down below, like that hat. It's cool. Alright, but until the next little one, please take care of each other, and please take care of yourselves. Because I love you. Mike out.
Looking for the extraordinary? We've got it. At Floor & Decor, we don't believe in having to choose between budget and style. And we don't think you should either. Spice up your kitchen with affordable designs that are all you. Stay on trend and in budget. What are you waiting for?
Hi, I'm regional commercial actor Neil Patrick Harris. I love coffee. I love starting my day with it, and more importantly, I look good drinking it. Hello there. I just don't love the jitters. That's why I drink Rise Mushroom Coffee. Most people think mushrooms are just sticks with hats on, but they're so much more. In fact, they're little nutrient bombs that blow regular coffee out of the water. Yeah, mushrooms. Yeah, thanks. With Rise, you get improved focus, sustained energy, and it's easy on the stomach. That's because we use only the best organic mushrooms, like Stumpy Warthog and Found a Hair in Mysupius, which sound like made-up names, because they are. And you're guaranteed to be surrounded by an aura of goodness with every cup. Rise Mushroom Coffee. You can drink it cold or hot, like me. Oh.
Rise Mushroom Coffee. Drink it cold or hot, like Neil.
Hey you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and in this old video, it's one of them, well, shucks, wherein things just going so swell type situations. Well, I mean, they would be right if it wasn't just like a little secret and a lot of murder of the very worst kind. But sure, if there wasn't, would I be telling it? You know the drill yourself, big dog. What happened back in 2012, a decade and a half ago at this point? Yeah, I feel sick too. It was a horror show, and what followed was a shit show. Know what you're trying to do. Before we get into it, please subscribe to see new videos every single week. Now, let's give it a go. Agency. That's what people in this story had, but I mean, it's also where this story was set. That's a tiny little town in Wapello County, Iowa. Viewed Seth as their own son. So it was, you know, they were happy as a pig in shite, basically, when he asked, to cut a long story short. To top it all off, Lisa was 4 months pregnant with the couple's first child. They even had a name already and picked out, Zoe Marie. But here comes the fall. Shortly after 5 a.m., May 26th, 2012, Seth Teckle made this 911 call.
Okay, 911. She's not breathing. Does she have any medical problems? She's been shot. I was in the car getting ready for work and I heard a gunshot. And I came running out and she's shot in the side and
A Wapello County Sheriff's deputy was first on the scene, finding Seth topless, only wearing a pair of loose-fitting cargo shorts. He was frantic and confused. The deputy, in fact, knew Seth and tried to calm him and explain what had happened. Between very deep breaths, Seth told him Lisa had been shot. Seth said he had been in the shower, getting ready for another day on the rig, when he heard a gunshot coming from inside his own house. Seth first went to grab one of his own gun because he was going to blow away whoever was shooting inside his house. But this mysterious shooter was gone, and it was only when he returned back in after chasing the invisible man around that he found his wife in bed, and she was very bloody.
We'll figure it out, bud. We'll figure it out.
When the deputy went inside, he found the house empty except for Lisa. She was laid on the bed surrounded by blood. As I said, a lot of blood. Lisa had been asleep when she'd been shot. It appeared from Seth's story that someone had broken in and shot her dead while she was asleep. Shot her from only a few feet away with a 12-gauge shotgun. Despite the best efforts of the responding paramedics, deputies, even her own father, a deputy himself, 23-year-old Lisa Teckle had lost too much blood and suffered too much damage to even make it to the hospital. After returning from inside the house, Todd Caldwell, he was caught on dash cam.
Go get him, now.
Who's him? The killer? Well, here, listen to this, hotshot. Todd actually had someone much more specific to him in mind. The him in question was the Teckle's neighbor, Brian Tate. See, Brian Tate and Seth Teckle, neighbors living in this middle of nowhere place in Iowa, they've been having a bit of a argy-bargy, bit of a dispute lately. And so, when Lisa Teckle ends up shot dead in her own bed, who had they just been fighting with? Big B, Brian Tate. See, the whole thing had started when Seth had been driving along and he found a deer carcass in the middle of the road. And so he was like, well, can't just leave this shit lying around. He dragged the deer carcass off the road, as you would. I mean, maybe you would. But the thing is, he left the deer carcass on his neighbor's property, Brian Tate's property. So Brian comes out of his house then one day, sees a dead deer, he's like, I'm not having this. Grabs the deer, knows that Seth had left there, puts the deer back onto Seth's land. Seth then promptly put it back into Brian's land. Nobody wants a dead deer. I mean, there's probably some good meat there, folks. Let's hold your horses. But just like that, war was on, folks. From then on, the neighbors had apparently taken any opportunity to inconvenience each other. Eventually, Seth had even employed his friends to help mess with Brian. Only Brian Tate. Slow your roll, folks. Not one to be messed with at all. We wouldn't have it. I wouldn't mess with him. See, Brian, it turned out, was not only a military veteran, he also had a very strong case of PTSD and paranoid schizophrenia. The feud between Seth and Brian Tate had escalated to the point of Brian calling the local sheriff's office. He'd finally had enough after someone, Seth and his pals, in Brian's opinion, they had dumped buckets of dog shite on his car, which, I mean, it's fair to have a problem with that, I suppose. And so the sheriff sent out a deputy to Brian Tate. Have a chat with him, see what's the crack. Only the deputy the sheriff sent out was Todd Caldwell, the person Brian Tate was having an argument with, his father-in-law. Brian Tate did not know this.
I can't Seth Teckle. Yep. He's a Teckle. Yeah, his dad owns Kitchen Bowl. Okay. And they're good people. Well, they really are. If you can, let us deal with it. Well, what if I'm the one who's got to catch him?
The first time Deputy Caldwell visited Brian, he was alone. The second time he had a colleague with them. but both times went pretty much the same. Todd Caldwell would say he's a lunatic. Don't mess with it. He's a madman. He'd be there, he was like caressing his shotgun like it was his pet cat. He was having a great time. And he was just ranting and raving. He was calling the Teckles terrorists. And so then, when Lisa ends up dead, Todd had just been to see him twice, and he had said some very mean, nasty folks things about Lisa and Seth. Well, you can see why Todd would immediately assume it was Brian Tate, the next door neighbor who has a shotgun and is insane and has a problem with them both. And so, the same day of Lisa's death, deputies, list any excuse, folks, to get locked and loaded. They get up there with their long rifles, full-on body armor, SWAT team style gear, probably tanks too. They go upside Brian Tate's house and are ready to kick in the door. But unbeknownst to them, Brian Tate actually turned out to be a lovely fella. He, unarmed, said, "How is, lads? Come on in. What's going on next door? Hope they're all right." I was happy to talk very calmly, answer any questions the responding officers had.
There's been a death at the home behind here of a female. We're going to do a neighborhood canvas. Just try to talk to as many people as we can. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay.
You were such a calm, quiet guy until this vandalism started, and then you're just like a different person.
I was Mr. Nice Guy for a long time. It done me no good. People took advantage of me, so I'm kind of taking a different approach to life right now, being more serious and more not such a nice guy.
He explained he had been angry about the vandalism and harassment, but he was doing much better now. And in fairness, the Teckles had started it by leaving a dead deer on his property and then buckets of shit on his car. So Brian Tate gets a bit maligned in this story. But one of the other reasons he was now so calm was that he had just increased his dosage of antipsychotic medication about a week earlier, and he was now finally getting better sleep, something his mother confirmed. She would say he was sleeping, he slept like a log all the time, and at 5 a.m. he was certainly asleep at home. There's no way he was next door, shooting a young mother as she slept. In fact, they actually ruled Brian Tate out relatively early, as in the official investigators and detectives did. The community, maybe not, and the Caldwells and the Teckles, more definitely not. Almost as if the reports about Brian Tate by his enemy's father-in-law were blown way out of proportion, if you can believe that.
I'm trying to have a conversation with you, you know?
I don't want to be yelled at.
Well, I'm trying to have a conversation with you, and I don't understand why you walked off.
Stop right there, criminal scum!
The actual investigators who had an actual job to do, they turned their attention to the only other person who was in the house.
Job board, security, but actually next month, I'm going to work here.
See, unknown to Seth was that a friend of his had actually arrived that morning to collect a puppy that Seth had been watching. And the friend, though, arrives and there's millions of cops around and he has no idea what's going on. But this friend was happy to yap away with the police, give him a bit more, inside scoop of Seth. And he would say, well, guess what? You'll never get this. Seth is a burner phone. You guys should probably know that. He also just recently borrowed a shotgun from another friend. Can't see it here. Wonder what that's about. And all the while, Seth is telling the detective one thing. His friends are telling deputies something else. Lisa's own father is banging on the door, telling Seth to get out and to get a lawyer and don't talk to the detectives. It was then Seth said, this probably has nothing to do with anything, but, I may as well tell you.
That's fine. I know I'm obviously probably number one right now. Talking about people that are in our lives and lives. Any extra there's
Enter a new character, Seth's co-worker at Job Corps where he was currently working, Rachel McFarland. At first, Seth claimed nothing had really happened between the two. Then Seth revised his story and said, okay, maybe we swapped some risque texts. Then maybe I sent her a picture of my dick or something like that. Alright, then he'd given her a hug. Fine. Okay, they kissed. But that was it. Honest to God, lads. I'm telling the truth now. When before I said I was telling the truth and I was lying, that was lying. But now I'm telling the truth. You can trust me.
the work that I was acting, but I wasn't seeing her. It wasn't anything. It was just, hey, how was your day? What did you consider sex. No, none of that. No, there wasn't any of that. We asked me, okay, listen, anything that you want, told us, no, I'm gonna add up the rate. Actually, Rachel's DNA won't be unequal or had sex with her. No, nothing more, nothing like that. I gave her hugs and I kissed her.
Eventually, Seth admitted that Rachel McFarland, she might somehow be under the impression that I'm actually going to leave my wife. She may be under that impression. I don't know why Rachel would be under the impression I'm going to leave, my young, heavily pregnant wife. Where did she get that idea? Women, what? Okay, well maybe I told her I was actually going to leave Lisa for her, but it was a joke. Duh. I was just telling Rachel I was going to leave Lisa for the attention because, you know what, lads love attention. Anything for her.
It's a big deal. Okay? Facts, right now, these case facts. Show us. You're responsible. No. I can't kill my wife. I can't do it. What facts do you have that I know this? I've seen. Okay. I know what you see. Guys do things. Okay. I am telling you, if I wanted to be with Rachel, I would get a divorce. I would not kill my wife over something that small. You know what? Right now, I guess I don't give a f*** what happens to me, okay? I know what happened. I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to get me upset, and it's working, right? I can't control what other people see or think they see. But I'm telling you that right now, I have to bury my wife and kid. My unborn kid, okay? Whoever did this is going to pay.
Meanwhile, the investigation continued along at speed. Once daylight had hit the scene, a proper search had started. The list of items the officers wanted to find was a short one. That missing camo Mossberg Model 512 gauge shotgun was certainly top of the list. A weapon that Seth had borrowed from a friend, mysteriously borrowed from a friend, and now was nowhere to be found. But the search had barely begun when an agent shouted out. They had it! Just a short walk from the trailer, hidden in the tree line, was the shotgun. And later, it would be confirmed by ballistics as the gun that had fired the shell that killed Lisa. The discovery of the gun was the biggest one ever, and it pointed the finger squarely at Seth Teckle. So at this point, if you're assuming Seth pulled the trigger and then he just ran to, I'll throw it in the bushes, right outside my house. He really is not. He's dumb as shit. He's dumb as the shit he poured on Brian Tate's car.
Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who does everything for you. Who can do your taxes in a day. So you can get up to $4,000 instantly. Now this is Taxes. Intuit TurboTax.
Create your own sunshine and embrace a gradually deeper tan daily with Jergens Natural Glow.
7 months after the couple had married, it was Lisa's own funeral. Once the ceremony had ended, and only the two, now divided families were left, Seth was approached by the same deputy who'd been first on the scene that night, and now he was asking him to join them outside. Once Seth Teckle did, he was read his rights and placed in cuffs. The cuffs that Seth Teckle was placed in were Lisa's own handcuffs from the jail.
The district courtroom at the Wapello County Courthouse was packed Thursday morning as family members, friends, and members of the media came to hear opening arguments in the trial of Seth Teckle. The state presented their arguments to the jury in under an hour, focusing more on Seth's relationships with his co-worker at Job Corps and how events in that relationship led up to the death of Lisa Teckle and her unborn child. On the other side, the defense took most of the morning not to talk about Seth's relationships, but rather talk more about the scene of the crime and how the crime was investigated by the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation and also the Wapello County Sheriff's Office.
From the beginning of Seth Teckle's murder trial, the defense focused almost entirely on Brian Tate. They did everything they could to throw him under the bus. And in the local community, people were still, talking about BT over there. Brian Tate, he's the one who did it. He clearly is Seth. Sure, why would he be killing her? It's definitely him. The rumors were abounding, even though the police had cleared him relatively early. And an interesting observation was actually made by the prosecution regarding when Seth and his father, Doug Teckle, first went back to the home after Lisa's murder, and Seth had been questioned, who finally gets a lawyer, and then Seth and his dad, they go back to the home, right? And apparently a person who was nearby witnessed Seth. What did Seth do as soon as he got out of the car? When they pull up, and it's his first time back in the house. He walks over to where the tree was, where he hid the feckin' shotgun, and he doesn't find it. Seth probably shot himself. The defense, though, would say, oh no, he didn't go over there because he was looking for the murder weapon, because he knew where it would be. No, he went over there because they'd spray painted like an X. The search investigators to say, oh, this is where it's been found. That's it, sure, easily explainable. That kind of tit for tat really kind of sums up, actually, the entire trial, with no definitive evidence to say who had done it. Rachel McFarland, Seth's mistress. Yeah, well, he feckin' wishes. Her testimony was particularly damning for Seth.
Started becoming more than just co-workers. It went from just normal conversations.
Something new to the table. A brand new defense team along with a brand new argument. Rather than offer up Brian Tate as, the sacrificial boogeyman and that he was the real guy, they instead went with a different tact. This time the defense were saying the authorities' investigation of this was shite. They never even swabbed Seth's hands for gunshot residue the morning, when they arrived and they found him. But you also have to remember Seth was just conveniently having a shower when his wife was killed, so they might not have actually got anything off him anyway, because he completely scrubbed his body from head to toe. He plays around with dog shit, so he's a pretty stinky bastard. And guess what? Can I shock you? Another surprise came when the defense revealed a revelation, right? Seth wasn't the only one with some secrets. Lisa Teckle, she had a few secrets of her own. She had been having her own affair, and it wasn't just sending dick pics and hugging. It was in fact her colleague at the jail and her lover, Jason Tinnis, who would testify that he and Lisa had begun seeing each other before Seth and Lisa had gotten married, and had only stopped it a few weeks before her death. He also admitted that at one time he thought the baby she was pregnant with, sure, it may have been his. Now, it wasn't. The testing would reveal it was Seth's baby, but that's, pretty dodgy. So then they were like, well, maybe he did it. Regardless, the defense did their best to drag out the details of the affair, while in contrast, they did the complete opposite with Seth's own affair. The defense's cross-examination of Rachel McFarland this time, it lasted only 7 minutes. It was basically limited to clarifying that so Lisa was having an affair with a coworker, or had been having an affair, and it was very sexual in nature. Seth was, I suppose, kind of trying to have an affair with this woman, Rachel, but yeah, even she would say no, they never had sex. It was literally dick pics. So it was like, why would he murder his wife for a woman he wasn't even, banging? The defense used the police's failure to uncover Lisa's affair as another failure on behalf of the investigation. They also argued that it showed the investigation had solely focused on Seth from such an early stage that the police used tunnel vision on him. Of course, they failed to talk about, this time, about how previous defenses and the police had initially suspected Brian Tate. They also questioned why Jason Tinnis hadn't been suspected or questioned, even though Jason had a solid alibi for the time of the murder. And Jason's alibi was from the last person you would think would lie from him. The wife he was cheating on with. After just 4 hours of deliberation, the jury foreman came out with a verdict that was actually pretty shocking. And I'm not being sarcastic. It was a guilty verdict. Guilty on all counts.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Seth Andrew Teckle, guilty of murder in the first degree.
Seth Teckle sat still, barely moving, and stared directly at each of Lisa's family members as they spoke. He was asked by the judge if he had anything to say.
Not this time, no.
After 3 trials in 2 years, Lisa Teckle's family heard the news. They've waited to hear.
Actually, this is the last time we have to see Seth Teckle, and that's fine by me.
guilty of murdering his wife, and the second count was of illegally terminating her pregnancy. If it had been a couple of weeks later, he would have been guilty of 2 counts of murder. Ultimately, it all came down to just one thing that kind of wraps up a lot of things. For Seth to be completely innocent, he would have to literally have the worst luck of all time. The next day, after he'd promised Rachel